part one of this conversation between Dorian Warren and Makiyah Moody, Dorian shares key moments in his career as an organizer, professor, and media figure which inform his leadership in his presidency at Community Change. He also lifts up the three strategies that guide Community Change's work: organizing, ideas, and politics.
So I'm Makiyah Moody, Senior Consultant with La Piana Consulting, and I am thrilled to have this conversation with Dorian Warren, who is the president of Community Change. I know Dorian from our days at University of Chicago, and I'm thrilled to have watched his career evolve and grow, and that we have this opportunity to really talk about the work that his organization is doing to protect our democracy and make America a better America. And so with that, Dorian, I wanted to give you a chance to maybe just introduce yourself, give some highlights maybe of your career before we dive into some of the questions.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Makiyah, for asking me to do this interview. It's great to be on screen with you and to watch your career over these last so many decades that we've known each other. So let me just start by saying I am a Southsider for life. I'm from the South Side of Chicago, born and raised, single parent, and I've had an amazing, my life is sort of emblematic of what I think my ancestors and for Black people in this country hoped could be the American dream. And I start there because I am now on, I think, my fourth or fifth career. So I got, at an early age, I became an activist, was politicized around an issue of police brutality when I was in high school, was organized by one of my high school friend's mother to protest against that. And then went off to college, downstate at a nice public institution where tuition was really cheap at the time, and was an activist there and got involved in political campaigns when I was in college back home in Chicago. And then went off to grad school and really wanted to understand the history of politics and social movements and Black politics in this country and labor politics and a range of other big, deep questions about our democracy. Took a leave of absence for a little bit from grad school and became an organizer full-time and worked as a community organizer and a union organizer in Chicago for a little while. Finished a PhD and started a teaching career. So I became an academic, a professional political science professor, first at University of Chicago and then at Columbia University, and did that for over a decade. And while I was doing that, I happened upon another career in media where I started just as a favor for a couple friends I had known who became famous. So I'm talking about Melissa Harris Perry, who I had known since graduate school, and Chris Hayes, who I had known. He was a freelance journalist in Chicago in the early 2000s. As a favor for those two friends, I started going on TV and kept doing it and kept being asked back. And then finally went on staff officially at MSNBC for 3 years, where I was a contributor. And at one point had my own digital show. It was a weekly show called Nerding Out for a year in 2015. At the same time, I was also at a think tank called the Roosevelt Institute, because I thought that my platform as just an academic wasn't really reaching far and wide enough in terms of the issues I cared about, and why I thought some big ideas and some bold solutions around inequality, around racial injustice, around what was happening to workers, why I needed a bigger, more public platform to do that. So I was at the Roosevelt Institute for many years, which is a think tank. And then along the way, had been on the board of this organization called Community Change, which supports grassroots organizing around the country. And I had been on that board for many years. I've been chair of the board and made a really pivotal decision a few years ago to leave academia and to get back in the fight and to get back in the day-to-day struggles of people trying to make this country better. So in 2016, I became vice president of Community Change, and then 2 years later in 2018, I became president.
Wow. So I just want to sit with that for a moment, because I feel like you painted a really great picture or tapestry of all of the different, I think, threads that have been inspirational and helped to guide you to where you are right now at Community Change. And I'm curious if you could maybe elaborate on how all of those elements converging, from going from a professor and an academic to an activist, from organizing, to being in the media spotlight, like how all of those experiences help inform how you lead as president in this moment for Community Change.
That's a really good question, and in many ways, it's the perfect fit for me. at this time in my career. And that's because at Community Change, we think about three primary strategies to empower low-income people, and especially low-income people of color. And just to let me back up and just say my organization, Community Change, was founded 51 years ago now. It was founded in 1968 to be the living memorial to Bobby Kennedy when he was assassinated during his run for president. And in his run, he was trying to electoralize, to make up a word, the issues of poverty in America and racial injustice in America. And so my organization was founded to be the living memorial to those ideals that he was advancing before his life was cut down way too short. And remember, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated only 2 months after Dr. King. So Dr. King's April, Bobby Kennedy is June. And so in some ways, I feel like my organization is born out of both the legacy of Dr. King, but more than Dr. King, the social movement of which he was a part, as well as Bobby Kennedy's role in trying to take into electoral politics some of the movement demands. And I want to come back to that point. So that's a little bit about my organization. And we work with 200 grassroots groups around the country around issues of racial justice and immigrant rights and economic justice and gender justice. So to go back to where I started, there are three strategies in which we think about our work. One is organizing, because our fundamental premise is that the only thing that beats organized money and power are organized people, and especially those people most affected by injustice. So organizing is at the heart of everything we do. You have to bring people together to demand change, whether it's in the streets or through the voting booth, for instance. So organizing is really important. Second is the role of ideas. And you gotta have big ideas that animate people, for which they can get excited around, and for which they're willing to take action. So it was like a big idea, the notion of, I don't know, racial justice and political equality for Black folks. That's a big idea. It's a big idea, the notion that we should inch out labor in America. It's a big idea, the notion that workers should have power. It's a big idea that we're living through now in terms of the Me Too movement, in terms of the fundamental basic question, should women be equal in this society or not? And how should we think about gender? So you gotta have the big ideas that lead to a North Star of freedom in all of its dimensions, whether it's at the workplace or at home or in the community or in schools, et cetera. So organizing ideas. And then the third is politics. Social movements have often had a tricky relationship with electoral politics, partly because ordinary people feel disenfranchised and don't think the electoral system is responsive. But on the other hand, it's been only through the use of that tool that we've been able to not only make advances, but secure them as best as possible. So you don't get to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 without movement energy around a big idea, which takes organizing, with electoral politics. You don't get to, frankly, a Barack Obama in 2008 without organizing, without big ideas, and without then electoral politics. So it's those three things for us that come together. And that sums up my career. I started off in doing protests. That's the organizing, both in high school and college, and organizing hotel workers and organizing in the community in Chicago. That was always tied to some big ideas about how we can make people's lives better and how they can be a voice for themselves. And it was always tied to electoral politics. So how do you both organize people to take action and protest injustice, but how do you go from protest to politics, to use the power of the vote to secure gains and victories? So organizing ideas politics has sort of been what I've been doing, right? Organizing in academia and think tanks in terms of the idea space. I've been engaged in electoral campaigns from 1995 through Obama in 08 and even more recently in 16. And then the last part of this, so there's the organizing, the ideas, and the politics. What wraps all of that around is telling a story that's compelling to people about why they matter, why they should take action, and telling the story to others around why they should advance social justice in this country. And so what some might call branding is really storytelling at its best. And so I bring that experience too from my days at MSNBC and being in the belly of the beast in terms of media and big media, and with the goal of telling stories. So I'm a former academic. I believe in ideas. I'm a former organizer. I believe in organizing. I've worked on campaigns. I believe in politics. And then my media experience allows me to tell a story that connects all those three things that really can advance justice in this country.